Good morning and welcome. My name is Mike Denny and I will be your host to an amazing series. It is known as The Secret Life of the Deserts of the Pacific Northwest. Many people assume that the Pacific Northwest is entirely covered with coniferous forest. Most of Oregon and Washington are in fact arid areas, desert sites. And we will be exploring some of the most beautiful desert sites found in Oregon and Washington. These desert areas have amazing diversity of life that are absolutely phenomenal. We will be looking at plants, at geology, at soils, insects, and all kinds of mammals, reptiles, and birds. These desert sites harbor some of the highest diversity in the states of Oregon and Washington. Water is a magnet in these desert areas. And Oregon is very, very different than Washington. So we will be discussing that. We'll be discussing conservation, and as an educational program, we will also be talking about stewardship and how we as humans have created some of the desert areas that are currently in the Pacific Northwest. We will also talk about the landscapes, these spectacular, beautiful landscapes that you will be seeing on this amazing series. So, I urge you, stick with this series and you will be truly amazed and blessed by what you see and all of the animals that we share these desert areas with. We went out and filmed at the Twin Sisters, which sits in Wallula Gap. It is a rock formation, a basalt magma formation of two blocks of basalt that stand side by side, and to many people they look like two cusps, molars. This area has been a traditional travel area, starting with the Native American tribes that passed through there, and then when the Western settlers came in, they utilized the same area. It was used by early explorers. Lewis and Clark went by the Twin Sisters. Nathaniel Wyeth party went by the Twin Sisters in 1834. Many famous people went by Twin Sisters, including David Douglas and many others. It has been a travel corridor, and now it has two railroad tracks past it along the Columbia River, and Highway 730 goes past it. It was a training area during World War II for aircraft to fly in and out of Wallula Gap at low elevation. The whole area sits at 340 feet above sea level. It is the warmest and lowest portion in the Columbia Basin. I have witnessed it be 112 degrees during the summer, Fahrenheit, during the summer months, and I have seen it down around 0 in the winter, 0 Fahrenheit. It does receive 6 to 8 inches of snow some winters. It is an area that hosts large numbers of desert-specific plants, insects, and animals. Primarily animals like mule deer and cottontail rabbits, desert cottontail rabbit. There are all kinds of insects that are obligated to desert areas that live there. It has lots of reptiles that live around it. It is just a phenomenal area, and it is a true cold desert because of its location and the longitudinal site it is at. On the day that we went out to Wallula Gap near the Twin Sisters, we discovered a beautiful breeding scale sagebrush lizard. These beautiful animals are about 4 inches long at most, and they live among the sagebrush, rabbit brush, and in the buckwheats, where they hunt insects. They are a reptile that is an insectivore, and they live on dune areas and loess soil sites. Sagebrush lizards are found right across the inland northwest from the Columbia Basin south into the Great Basin. They are an amazingly beautiful small lizard. While out exploring in Wallula Gap, we came across a very large gopher snake. This is a Pacific gopher snake. And this particular individual was well in excess of 50 inches, probably more than 3 inches at the center. Absolutely a large, large serpent for the interior Northwest. A reptile that hunts rodents, lizards, birds, and it is a constrictor. And it will wrap coils around whatever it is it catches and suffocates them and then swallows them head first, then goes and lays up until it can digest those meals. Pacific gopher snakes are amazing animals because they start coming out when the air temperatures are no more than 56, 57 degrees. And they are out every evening during the extreme heat of the summer, well into late fall when it gets down to a high of about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Gopher snakes often den with rattlesnakes, and there is an old myth that gopher snakes eat rattlesnakes. Not so. They frequently den in rattlesnake dens and will winter there. Pacific gopher snakes can reach up to 54, 55 inches long. But this one was about 50 inches, a little more than 50 inches, which is unbelievably large for Walla Walla County, Washington, where we found it. In the Wallula area, throughout and along the shoreline of the Columbia River, lives a large beetle that is called a darkling beetle. Darkling beetles are detrital feeders, which means they feed on bits and pieces of plant parts that plants have shed or plants have died, and they come in and eat those parts. Darkling beetles also spend the heat of the day during the summer months deep in rodent burrows, and then they emerge in the evenings where they start feeding on detritus. The amazing thing about darkling beetles is that their elytra is fused, which means they cannot fly. They are a ground beetle that never learns to fly because their wings are fused so that they do not desiccate in the heat of the summer. So with a fused elytra, which is their shell on top, it allows them to remain out in the mornings in the desert, searching for food longer than if they could fly off and get into shade. They're harmless, they do not bite, they simply crawl around. A lot of them get run over on roads, and a lot of them survive late into the fall till the first freeze, and it's long after they've laid their eggs underground that those adults then succumb to the cold weather. Out in the Wallula Gap area, only in certain summers, there is an absolutely beautiful flower that blooms. Blooms in clumps, and it's called the desert broom rape or the yellow broom rape. This is a plant that grows in very, very sandy locations where there are dunes. The amazing thing about this plant is that it is saprophytic, which means that it gets all of its nutrients off of other plants that are growing in the area. In the case of the plants, the yellow broom rape that were photographed, those were growing off the root system of snow buckwheat, which was pretty amazing. Broom rape is derived from a Dutch word, and it does not mean what it sounds like. Yellow broom rapes are absolutely gorgeous, and they have a red-orange variant that also grows in these patches with the bright yellow ones. And if you look at the photo, you'll see how absolutely stunning these flowers are. There's a single blossom that grows at the end of a 3-inch stalk. The entire stalk is yellow. There has no chlorophyll anywhere in that plant. And so that's why it's reliant on other vascular plants for its nutrients and its moisture. Growing in extremely sandy areas is a beautiful native flower called the dusty maiden. This plant has this beautiful rosy balsam, gorgeous flower. It's a multifloral flower head, and there's probably anywhere from 25 to 40 flower blossoms on each head. And they bloom only for a week or so in early summer. Dusky maidens are well loved by pollinators. Native bees, ants, and beetles all pollinate on this plant. Dusky maidens grow in almost semi-colonies. You'll find them all growing in a general close unit. One thing that's very interesting is that they are a plant that will not grow in any other soil type other than sand. It allows them to grow around Wallula Gap in Walla County and scattered all over the central basin wherever there are sand dunes. So they are referred to as a sand dune obligate plant. Another plant that is a dune obligate is Indian rice grass. This is an absolutely beautiful native grass that produces little round seeds on the end of a gorgeous fluorescent stalk. And the fluorescence of a plant are the flowers. And so once this grass has bloomed, it produces these beautiful little what I call micro millet-looking seeds. Loads of birds and insects and rodents love Indian rice grass, and they will forage for it. They'll pull the seed heads down and munch off as many of those seeds as they can get a hold of. Rodents such as Ord's kangaroo rat and Paragmiscus, which is the deer mouse, will take Indian rice grass down into their burrows where they have granaries and store it up for the winter. It is a plant that only grows in sand, so not found anywhere else in the West. Found throughout the Great Basin and into the Columbia Basin is a beautiful white blooming flower that has 10 to 15 blooms on each flower head, and it's called the desert verbena. Verbenas are a sand obligate. They only grow in sandy areas. They grow out across the sand. The leaves are spread out across the sand. And this plant is greatly appreciated by many, many pollinators. They come, collect the pollen, and also utilize the nectar that the plant produces. Sand verbenas are becoming more and more uncommon, and when they are discovered, they should be readily protected. Good evening. We are here in western Walla County, and it is an absolutely spectacular evening. Not a breath of breeze, warm, and all kinds of wildlife. Right now I'm standing here and I hear coyotes, a western screech owl, great horned owl, and we even had a snipe winnowing. So today, while out, we discovered cedar waxwings. This is a frutivore or an omnivore that also flycatches, a beautiful native bird. Cedar waxwings are extremely common during some portions of the year, and they are gregarious. They form big flocks, and they will often feed on fruit trees as well as berry trees. So the interesting thing about them is that they often hang out with American robins. And cedar waxwings can be extremely noisy and active while they're feeding. Not only do they eat small berries and fruits, but they also fly catch. And they will dart out, grab flying insects, and they often will hang around together all during the spring. And then about April, they start to select breeding sites and build a nest. Absolutely gorgeous native bird, found only in North America. The other species that we encountered today was the tree swallow, which is a gorgeous swallow species. It has a vivid blue back and a beautiful pure white chest, throat, and vent. Tree swallows are cavity nesters. They use the holes excavated by downy woodpeckers. Today, this pair that we got great looks at, we're getting ready to start laying eggs in the downy woodpecker cavity. What's interesting about tree swallows is the vast distance that they migrate. In August, they head south with their young, and they will fly clear down into Costa Rica, Honduras, Nicaragua, and spend the entire winter down there. And then in late January, they start north. And they arrive here usually by mid-March, or some winters even a little earlier than mid-March, like the end of the first week of March. They are an extremely beautiful bird, and they are a serious aerial predator. They hunt all kinds of flying insects, and they seldom miss. They also eat a large number of mosquitoes and midges and gnats. Really an important predator of flying insects. The other item we came across this afternoon was much more troublesome, and that was a red-tailed hawk that had been shot out of the top of a tree. This beautiful raptor was shot by someone with a rifle and was lying dead on the ground below a large cottonwood tree. Been hit in the head. The sad thing is that people feel that they have the right to shoot raptors. All raptors in the United States are protected. These are federally and state protected species. And when I find a dead raptor that some ignorant person shot, I really feel bad, because these birds provide tremendous services to all of us, especially to agriculture. They eat loads of mice, they eat snakes, they eat all kinds of insects, large crickets, grasshoppers. There's nothing that they will not go after. Red-tailed hawks are an amazingly powerful bird. They are named the red-tailed hawk, and their Latin name is Buteo jamaicensis, which simply means that they were first described from Jamaica. They are an amazing bird. They have highly variable plumage. So there are black red-tailed hawks from northern and central BC, and down in the southwestern United States, there are almost virtually white ones, which are called Fuertes red-tailed hawk, and they are beautiful. So red-tailed hawks vary in plumage, and many people get really mixed up by them. When you find one that's injured and has been shot, it is something that is just really sad. And it's a loss to all of us, as well as to the ecology of the area. This afternoon, we came across an amazing group of plants. These are desert blooming flowering plants. The first one was the desert shooting star. This is an amazing native plant. It is only located in the American arid West, and it is absolutely gorgeous. It is purple lavender, has a yellow anther, and is found only in moist sites that are seasonally moist early in the spring. It blooms, and shortly thereafter, in about 8 days, fades away, and it goes to seed. So the desert shooting star should be looked for in mid-March, anywhere in the lowland deserts of the Pacific Northwest. Another plant that we located today was the golden currant, which is a native currant that grows largely in desert arid areas, and it is one of the first plants to bloom in massive numbers of blooms, which allows the native pollinators to come and start pollinating, and also to be able to glean pollen and nectar from these beautiful yellow blossoms. Some golden currants have a real smell of cinnamon. The blossoms do, and so it's really interesting to find them. They're absolutely beautiful, and the bush can get up to 6 feet tall or taller, and it becomes an extremely important bush during the hot summer months because it creates thermal cover and allows birds and small mammals to get out of the direct sun in arid areas. So it's a very important plant. The other important plant we came across that was already in bloom, and that is the mule's ear balsam root. This gorgeous big plant has a wonderful composite flower, and the flowers of the balsam root are so important to, look at this, I have a lacewing right in front of me. They are so important to early pollinators as well. So the very first flowers of their size to bloom in desert areas of the Pacific Northwest. Balsam roots have a huge taproot, which allows them to store immense amounts of water, and in the spring and late in the winter, when lots of rain or snow melt occurs, they pull in that water, and it allows them to bloom way late into the spring and sometimes into the early summer. Eventually, they do dry up and go to seed, and it is their seed that so many birds also feed on. All of these plants are native, and they are extremely important to early pollinators, as well as later in the season to birds and small rodents that feed on seed. Out on the Columbia River, we discovered 3 common loons. Common loons are migrants. They do not nest in the deserts here. They nest in northern Washington and up into Canada and way on north into Alaska. Common loon is a huge bird, and they are master fishermen. There's very few fish that can evade a common loon. They are very, very fast flyers, and they migrate through the Pacific Northwest, often from the coast. Common loons will spend most of the winter along the Pacific Northwest coast, which is called the Eastern Pacific Ocean. And they feed on everything, crustaceans, fish, all kinds of organisms. In the Columbia River system, they frequently feed on crawdads and small fish. Many of those fish are introduced species, such as crappie, bluegill, yellow perch. They feed on all of those. So, because we have such large numbers of these highly invasive introduced fish species, common loons do very, very well in the Columbia. Oftentimes, non-breeding individuals that are not mature yet will spend parts clear into June, July on the Columbia, still feeding on crawdads and fish. Beautiful bird, has an amazing call, and they're known as the voice of the North Woods because their call is so unique. They have 2 young, and often the young will ride on the back of the adults as they're growing up. So, pretty amazing bird, and it is wonderful to see them here in the deserts of the Pacific Northwest.